The cafeteria at Lincoln High School was packed with hundreds of students that Tuesday afternoon. The smell of pizza and French fries filled the air as teenagers laughed and talked at their tables. Near the big windows that looked out at the football field sat a girl named Zariah Coleman. She had beautiful dark skin that glowed in the sunlight and long curly hair that bounced when she moved. Zariah was quietly eating her lunch alone at a table in the corner. She had a sandwich her grandmother made that morning with love and a small bag of chips. Zariah was new to Lincoln High. Her family had moved to this town just 3 months ago from Atlanta. Every day she came to school hoping to make friends, but most students already had their groups. They looked at her like she was invisible. Today would be different, though. Today everything would change in a way nobody could ever forget. The noise in the cafeteria was so loud that Zariah could barely hear herself think. She took a small bite of her sandwich and looked around the room. Groups of kids sat together laughing and sharing food. She missed her old school, where she had best friends who knew her since kindergarten. Here she felt like a stranger in a strange land. Across the cafeteria, a group of students sat at the most popular table in the whole school. Derek Matthews was the leader of this group. He was tall with blonde hair and always wore expensive clothes that showed his family had money. Next to him sat Amber Stone, who had perfect straight hair and wore makeup that made her look older than 16. They were surrounded by other kids who followed them everywhere and laughed at everything they said. Derek loved being the center of attention. He loved making jokes that made people laugh even when those jokes hurt others. Today Derek was bored. He looked around the cafeteria, searching for something to do. That is when his eyes landed on Zariah sitting alone in the corner. A mean smile spread across his face. He nudged Amber with his elbow and pointed at Zariah. Amber looked over, and her eyes lit up with that same cool expression. They whispered to each other, and the others at their table started looking too. Derek stood up from his chair, and the whole group followed him like puppies following their master. They walked across the cafeteria floor, making their way toward Zariah's table. Other students noticed, and some stopped talking to watch what was about to happen. Zariah was looking down at her sandwich when she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw Derek and his friends standing around her table. Her heart started beating faster. She had seen these students before in the hallways. Everyone knew who they were. Derek put his hands on her table and leaned forward with that mean smile still on his face. He said in a loud voice that everyone nearby could hear, "Well, well, well, what do we have here? The new girl sitting all alone. That is so sad." His friends laughed like he had said the funniest thing in the world. Amber stepped closer and looked at Zariah's lunch. She wrinkled her nose and said, "What kind of sandwich is that? It looks weird. Did you bring that from some food stamp store?" More laughter erupted from the group. Zariah felt her cheeks getting hot. She wanted to say something back, but the words got stuck in her throat. Derek reached down and grabbed Zariah's sandwich right out of her hands. He held it up in the air like it was a trophy. He shouted, "Hey everyone, look at this." The new girl brought lunch from home because she cannot afford cafeteria food. The laughter spread across the cafeteria now. More students were watching, and some were pointing. Zariah stood up quickly and reached for her sandwich. She said quietly, "Please give that back. That is my lunch." But Derek just held it higher above his head where she could not reach. He was much taller than her. Amber pushed Zariah's tray, and it fell to the floor with a loud crash. Her chips scattered everywhere, and her juice box spilled, creating a puddle on the tile floor. The entire cafeteria went silent for just a second as everyone turned to look. Then the laughter got even louder. Derek tossed Zariah's sandwich on the floor right into the puddle of juice. He stepped on it with his expensive sneaker, grinding it into the ground. He said, "Oops, my bad. I guess you will go hungry today." His friends were laughing so hard that some of them had tears in their eyes. Zariah looked down at her ruined lunch on the dirty floor. She felt tears starting to fill her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give these bullies the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had been through hard things before. Her father had died when she was 10 years old. Her mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Her grandmother always told her that Coleman women were strong and nobody could break them. Zariah remembered those words now. She slowly bent down and started picking up the pieces of her sandwich from the floor. Her hands were shaking, but she kept going. Derek and his friends were still standing there, watching her and laughing. Then Zariah did something that nobody expected. She stood up holding the ruined sandwich in her hands and looked Derek straight in the eyes. She did not look away. She did not blink. Her voice was quiet, but every word was clear as crystal. She said, "You can take my lunch away from me. You can laugh at me and try to make me feel small. But you will never take my strength. You will never take my dignity. I know who I am and where I come from. My grandmother taught me that real strength is not about being mean to people who cannot fight back. Real strength is standing tall when the whole world tries to push you down. So go ahead and laugh all you want. You are not hurting me. You are showing everyone in this room who you really are." The cafeteria had gone completely quiet now. You could hear a pin drop. Nobody was laughing anymore. Derek's smile disappeared from his face. He looked around and realized everyone was staring at him, but not in the way he wanted. Amber took a step back, looking uncomfortable for the first time. In the corner of the cafeteria, a girl named Emma Davis had been watching everything. Emma was white with red hair and freckles across her nose. She was shy and quiet and usually never spoke up about anything. Emma sat with a group of girls who were considered popular, but she never really felt like she fit in with them. She had noticed Zariah before in their English class. Zariah always raised her hand and gave smart answers. Emma thought Zariah seemed nice, but she had been too scared to talk to her because her friends might make fun of her. Now watching what Derek and Amber were doing to Zariah made Emma feel sick to her stomach. She thought about all the time she had stayed quiet when she saw someone getting bullied. She thought about how she always went along with what the popular kids did because she was afraid of being left out. But seeing Zariah standing there with such courage made Emma realize something important. Being popular did not matter if it meant being cruel. Having friends did not matter if those friends were mean to others. Emma felt something break inside her chest. It was her fear breaking apart. Emma suddenly stood up from her table so fast that her chair made a loud scraping sound on the floor. Everyone turned to look at her. Her face was red and her hands were balled into fists at her sides. She took a deep breath, and then her voice rang out across the silent cafeteria. She said, "Enough. This is not funny. None of this is funny." She walked across the cafeteria floor toward Zariah's table. Derek and Amber watched her coming with confused expressions on their faces. Emma stopped right next to Zariah and turned to face Derek. She said louder this time, "You think you are so cool, Derek? You think making someone feel bad makes you important? You are not cool. You are not funny. You are a bully, and everyone here knows it. You should be ashamed of yourself. All of you should be ashamed." Her voice cracked a little, but she kept going. "Zariah is brave and kind, and she did not do anything to deserve this. I am sick of watching people like you hurt others just because you can. I am sick of staying quiet. Well, I am not staying quiet anymore." Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out her own lunch. She placed it on the table in front of Zariah. She said, "Here, you can have my lunch. I am sorry I did not stand up for you sooner." For a moment, nobody moved. The entire cafeteria seemed frozen in time. Then something amazing started to happen. A boy named Marcus, who played on the basketball team, stood up from his table. He was black like Zariah, and he had been watching everything with anger in his eyes. He walked over and put his lunch next to Emma's. He said, "Mine too. You can have my lunch too." Then a girl named Sophia with long dark hair and brown skin stood up. She brought her lunch over and said, "And mine." Nobody should be treated like this. One by one, students started standing up all across the cafeteria. Some were black and some were white, and some were Asian and Hispanic. Some were popular and some were quiet kids who usually never spoke. They all started walking toward Zariah's table, bringing their lunches and setting them down. Soon there was a whole pile of food on the table and on the chairs around it. Sandwiches and apples and cookies and juice boxes and bags of chips. The table looked like a feast for a queen. Zariah stood there with tears finally rolling down her cheeks, but these were different tears. These were tears of joy and surprise and relief. She could not believe what was happening. Derek and Amber and their friends just stood there looking around in shock. The laughter had completely stopped. Now they were the ones being stared at, but nobody was smiling. Students were looking at them with disappointment and anger and disgust. Derek's face turned red. He mumbled, "Whatever. This is stupid," and started walking back to his table, but his friends did not follow him this time. Amber looked at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. She turned and walked quickly toward the cafeteria doors. She wanted to disappear. The strange silence that filled the room was heavy and thick. It was not an angry silence or a scared silence. It was a silence full of respect and understanding. Everyone was feeling the same thing at the same moment. They were feeling shame for staying quiet before. They were feeling pride in standing up now. They were feeling connected to each other in a new way. The cafeteria workers who served food behind the counter were watching too. Mrs. Johnson, who had worked in that cafeteria for 20 years, had tears streaming down her face. She had seen a lot in her time at Lincoln High, but she had never seen anything like this. Principal Henderson had been in his office when a teacher came running to tell him there was some kind of situation in the cafeteria. He rushed over expecting to find a fight or something terrible. But when he walked through the cafeteria doors, he stopped in his tracks. He saw Zariah standing at a table surrounded by dozens of students. He saw the pile of food on the table. He saw the way everyone was looking at her with kindness in their eyes. He saw Derek sitting alone at his table with his head down. Principal Henderson was a tall black man who had been working in education for 30 years. He had been a principal at Lincoln High for 10 years, and he took his job seriously. He walked slowly into the middle of the cafeteria, and everyone turned to look at him. He cleared his throat and said, "Can someone please tell me what happened here?" Emma spoke up first. Her voice was stronger now. She explained everything from the beginning. She told him how Derek and his friends had bullied Zariah and destroyed her lunch. She told him how Zariah had responded with courage and dignity. She told him how the students had decided to stand together. Other students nodded and added their own parts of the story. Principal Henderson listened to every word with a serious expression on his face. When they finished talking, Principal Henderson walked over to Zariah. He looked at her with kind eyes and said, "Young lady, I am so sorry this happened to you. No student should ever be treated this way in my school. I want you to know that this behavior will not be tolerated. Not today and not ever." Then he turned to face the entire cafeteria. His voice was loud and clear. He said, "What I witnessed here today broke my heart, but it also gave me hope. I saw cruelty and hatred, but I also saw courage and unity. I saw young people making the choice to do what is right, even when it is hard. That is what character looks like. That is what leadership looks like. Every single one of you who stood up for Zariah today showed me that this generation has the power to change the world. You showed me that love is stronger than hate and that standing together is more powerful than tearing each other apart." He paused and looked directly at Derek, who was still sitting at his table, trying to make himself invisible. Principal Henderson said, "Derek Matthews and Amber Stone, please come with me to my office right now. We need to have a very serious conversation about your actions and the consequences you will face." Derek slowly stood up and walked toward the principal with his head hanging low. Amber appeared from wherever she had been hiding and followed them out of the cafeteria. After they left, the cafeteria erupted into noise again, but this time it was different. Students were talking excitedly about what had just happened. Some were hugging Zariah and introducing themselves. Emma stayed right by Zariah's side like a protective sister. She said, "I am Emma. I am in your English class. I should have talked to you before, but I was too scared. I am not scared anymore. Do you want to sit with me and my friends from now on?" Zariah wiped the tears from her face and smiled the biggest smile anyone had seen. She said, "I would love that. Thank you for standing up for me. You are the bravest person I have ever met." Emma shook her head and said, "No, you are the brave one. You stood up to Derek when nobody else would. You did not fight back with meanness. You fought back with truth and strength. You taught all of us what real courage looks like." The two girls hugged, and in that moment, a friendship was born that would last for many years. Marcus came over and introduced himself. He said, "Hey, I'm Marcus. I play basketball. You should come watch our game on Friday. We could use some more fans in the stands." Sophia joined them and said, "And I am Sophia. I am in the drama club. We are doing a play next month and we need more people. You should audition. I bet you would be amazing." Zariah felt warmth spreading through her whole body. For the first time since moving to this town, she did not feel alone. The rest of that day was like a dream for Zariah. Students kept coming up to her in the hallways between classes. They apologized for not being friendly before. They asked her to sit with them at lunch tomorrow. They asked for her phone number so they could text her. Teachers who heard about what happened in the cafeteria stopped her to tell her how proud they were of the way she handled herself. By the end of the school day, Zariah had more friend requests on social media than she could count. When she got home that evening, her grandmother was in the kitchen making dinner. Zariah dropped her backpack by the door and ran into the kitchen. She wrapped her arms around her grandmother and hugged her tight. Her grandmother looked surprised and said, "Well, what is all this about, child?" Zariah told her the whole story from beginning to end. She told her about Derek and the bullying and the ruined lunch. She told her about finding her courage and speaking her truth. She told her about Emma and all the other students who stood up for her. She told her about the strange silence that fell over the cafeteria and the mountain of food that appeared on her table. Her grandmother listened with tears in her eyes. When Zariah finished talking, her grandmother held her face in both hands and said, "I told you, baby. I told you that Coleman women are strong. You showed that whole school what we are made of. Your daddy would be so proud of you right now. I am so proud of you." That night, Zariah could not sleep. She kept thinking about everything that had happened. She thought about how scared she had felt when Derek first approached her table. She thought about how her heart had been pounding so hard. She thought it might jump out of her chest. She thought about the moment when she made the choice to stand up instead of staying down. She thought about Emma's face when she slammed her hand on the table and spoke up. She thought about all those students walking across the cafeteria, bringing their lunches like offerings of peace. She realized that today had changed her in some way she could not fully explain. She felt stronger. She felt seen. She felt like she mattered. The next morning when Zariah walked into Lincoln High School, everything was different. Students waved at her in the hallways. People said good morning and smiled real smiles. When she walked into the cafeteria for lunch, she saw Emma sitting at a table near the windows waving her arms in the air. Zariah walked over and saw that the table was full of students. There was Marcus and Sophia and a bunch of other kids she recognized from yesterday. They had saved a seat for her right in the middle. As she sat down, everyone started talking at once, asking her questions and telling her stories and making her laugh. Across the cafeteria, Derek sat at a different table. He was not surrounded by his usual group of followers anymore. Most of them had found other places to sit. Derek looked over at Zariah's table and saw her laughing with all those students. He saw how happy she looked. Something twisted in his stomach. Was it guilt? Was it shame? He was not sure. He had been suspended from school for 3 days, and his parents were furious with him. His father had given him a long lecture about respect and character. His mother had cried. Principal Henderson had made him write a letter of apology to Zariah. Derek had stared at the blank paper for hours, not knowing what to say. How do you apologize for being cruel? How do you say sorry for trying to hurt someone just because you could? He finally wrote something short and simple. He wrote that he was sorry for what he did and that it was wrong and that he hoped she could forgive him someday. He was supposed to give the letter to Principal Henderson today, but it was still in his backpack. He was too ashamed to hand it over. Amber was suspended too. She had sent Zariah a text message apologizing, but Zariah had not responded yet. Zariah was not sure if she was ready to forgive them, but she was trying. Weeks passed and life at Lincoln High continued to change. The story of what happened in the cafeteria that day spread throughout the whole school and even to other schools in the district. Local news reporters heard about it and wanted to interview Zariah, but she said no. She did not want to be famous. She just wanted to be a normal student with friends. Principal Henderson used the incident to start new programs at the school, focused on kindness and inclusion. He created a student committee called Unity Council and asked Zariah and Emma to be the leaders. They accepted. The Unity Council met once a week to discuss ways to make Lincoln High a better place for everyone. They planned events where students from different backgrounds could meet and learn about each other. They created a peer support program where students could talk to trained peers if they were being bullied or were having a hard time. The changes were not perfect, and there were still problems, but things were getting better. More students felt safe. More students felt included. More students found their voices. Emma and Zariah became best friends. They were inseparable. They did homework together and went to movies together and talked on the phone for hours. Emma told Zariah that standing up that day in the cafeteria had changed her life. She said she used to be so worried about what everyone thought of her that she never did what she really wanted. Now she did not care as much. She was being herself and it felt amazing. One day, about 2 months after the incident, Zariah was at her locker getting books for her next class when someone tapped her shoulder. She turned around and was surprised to see Derek standing there. He looked different somehow. His face was not wearing that mean smile anymore. He looked nervous and uncomfortable. He said, "Hey Zariah, can I talk to you for a minute?" Zariah's first instinct was to walk away, but something made her stay. She said, "Okay, what do you want?" Derek took a deep breath and pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was the apology letter he had written weeks ago. He said, "I know saying sorry does not fix what I did. I know I hurt you and embarrassed you in front of everyone. I have been thinking about it every day since it happened. I do not know why I did it. I guess I thought being mean made me cool or important or something. But it does not. It just makes me a bad person. I wrote you this letter, but I have been too scared to give it to you. I am tired of being scared, though. So here." He held out the letter to her. Zariah took it and unfolded it slowly. She read the words he had written. They were simple, but they seemed real. She looked back up at Derek and said, "Thank you for apologizing. It takes courage to admit when you are wrong. I am not sure if I can be your friend, but I can accept your apology. I hope you learned something from all this." Derek nodded his head fast. He said, "I did. I learned a lot. I joined this program that Principal Henderson started for students who have bullied others. We meet with a counselor and talk about why we do the things we do and how to be better. It is actually helping. I am trying to be a better person, Zariah. I really am. Zariah felt something soften inside her chest. She realized that people could change if they really wanted to. She said, "That is good, Derek. I am glad you are trying. Everyone deserves a second chance." Derek smiled a small smile and said, "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." He walked away, and Zariah stood there holding his letter in her hands. Emma came running up and said, "Was that Derek? What did he want?" Zariah told her about the conversation and showed her the letter. Emma read it and said, "Wow, maybe people really can change." Zariah said, "I think so. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? The important thing is learning from them and doing better next time." Emma linked her arm through Zariah's, and they walked down the hallway together. By the end of the school year, Lincoln High was a completely different place. The change that started in the cafeteria that day had spread through the entire building like ripples in a pond. Students were kinder to each other. Teachers noticed less bullying and more cooperation. The Unity Council had become one of the most popular clubs in school. Zariah gave a speech at the end of year assembly about courage and standing up for what is right. She talked about how one moment can change everything. She talked about how everyone has the power to make a difference. The whole auditorium gave her a standing ovation that lasted for 5 whole minutes. That summer, Zariah spent almost every day with Emma and their growing group of friends. They went to the lake and had barbecues and stayed up late telling stories. Zariah felt happier than she had been in years. She thought about her father and wished he could see her now. She imagined him looking down from heaven and smiling. When the next school year started, Zariah was no longer the new girl. She was a leader. She was respected. She was loved. Derek kept his promise to be better. He stopped hanging out with the kids who encouraged his mean behavior. He joined the Unity Council and worked hard to help make the school a welcoming place. It took time, but slowly people began to trust him again. Amber also changed. She apologized to Zariah in person with real tears in her eyes. She said she had been dealing with problems at home and taking it out on others. She started seeing a therapist and working on herself. Zariah forgave her too. Years later, when Zariah graduated from Lincoln High School, she was named valedictorian. She stood at the podium in front of hundreds of people and gave a speech about her time at the school. She talked about that day in the cafeteria. She said it was the day she learned that courage is not about never being scared. Courage is about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. She said that day taught her that standing up for yourself and others can create waves of change that reach farther than you can imagine. As Zariah spoke those words, she looked out at the crowd and saw Emma crying happy tears. She saw Marcus and Sophia and so many other students who had stood with her that day. She saw Principal Henderson nodding his head with pride. She even saw Derek sitting in the audience looking at her with respect in his eyes. Zariah finished her speech by saying, "So to everyone listening today, I want you to remember this. You have power. Your voice matters. Your actions matter. One person standing up can inspire dozens more. One act of courage can change an entire community. Do not wait for someone else to be brave. Be brave yourself. Stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. Stand up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. Choose kindness over cruelty. Choose love over hate. Choose courage over fear. Because in the end, those are the choices that matter. Those are the choices that change the world." "Thank you." The entire crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Zariah smiled and waved and felt her heart so full of joy it might burst. She had come to Lincoln High as a scared, lonely girl, and she was leaving as a confident young woman ready to change the world. The strange silence that fell over the cafeteria that day had not been an ending. It had been a beginning. And so, when the cheering finally softened into a warm hush and the auditorium lights found their gentle glow, the story of Zariah Coleman settled into the hearts of everyone who had watched her grow, teachers and classmates, and even the students who had only heard pieces of the cafeteria legend but felt changed by it anyway. And in that hush, Zariah herself understood something she had only sensed in flashes before. That courage rarely arrives like thunder. It comes like breath, steady and stubborn, refusing to stop. That dignity is not the absence of pain. It is the choice to meet pain with an open spine and an open heart. That community is not a word for assemblies and posters. It is a living promise we keep to one another in the smallest moments, when we decide to be kind even when it is costly. And that forgiveness, though complicated and never owed, can be the quiet bridge that turns a hard history into a wiser future. Not because it forgets what happened, but because it dares to imagine what could happen next if we each took one step toward better. In the months that followed graduation, as summer bent to the steady rhythm of fall, and the football field outside those big cafeteria windows traded green for gold, Lincoln High kept telling and retelling the tale, not to glorify the bullying, not to turn Zariah into a myth too perfect to be real, but to practice the remembering of what a single afternoon taught them, that a room can turn from laughter to silence when one person speaks truth. That silence can turn to solidarity when another person lays down fear and stands up. That solidarity can turn to a movement when many say, "Me too," not to pain, but to courage. New freshmen wide-eyed, anxious heard about the Unity Council before they learned the bell schedule. They learned that leadership looked like passing the mic, like saving a seat, like noticing the quiet kid at the edge of the room. They learned that kindness was not the soft option, but the brave one, because kindness asks us to risk our cool for someone else's dignity. Derek kept showing up to meetings that were sometimes awkward, to service projects where no one clapped, to conversations that asked him to listen more than speak, and each unglamorous step stitched a different story onto his name. A story not of perfection, but of honest repair. Amber, too, kept doing the work that nobody sees, therapy sessions that brought tears she had long avoided, apologies that were more listening than talking, small daily choices that turned a habit of sarcasm into a habit of care. And while not everyone rushed to trust them, enough people noticed that change is a verb, and verbs take time. And time given freely is one of the most radical gifts a community can offer. As for Emma, she kept practicing the muscle she discovered that day. Not the loud kind of courage, though she could be loud when needed, but the steady kind, the kind that asks, "Who's missing?" When a circle forms, the kind that slides a chair from the corner to the middle and says, "This belongs to you too," the kind that texts first. That introduces people who might never have met. That stays after to sweep confetti and fold chairs, because celebration is part of the work. And Zariah college bound. Scholarship letters pinned on the fridge with magnets shaped like peaches from the home she left behind, kept writing, kept speaking, kept reminding herself that strength is not an armor you wear to hide your tenderness, but a practice that makes tenderness possible. Calling her grandmother each Sunday to swap recipes and blessings. Mentoring a ninth grader who reminded her of herself, hair falling in the same cascade of curls, eyes bright with the same careful hope. Sending postcards back to Lincoln High that read, in her curling script, "Keep choosing each other." On the day she left for campus, the sky was the forgiving blue of a new notebook. And as she hugged her mother and breathed in the familiar scent of laundry soap and cinnamon and every hard-won morning they had survived, Zariah understood that the strange silence that had once fallen over a cafeteria was never really silence at all. It was the sound of a community exhaling its fear, the sound of shame making room for better, the sound of power redistributing itself from the loudest to the bravest, from the proudest to the most persistent. It was the sound of a seed splitting underground, invisible to most, inevitable to nature. Years from now, the details will blur: who spilled the juice, which table sat where, what day of the week it was, but the marrow of it will remain, that a girl picked dignity over despair, that another girl picked courage over comfort, that a crowd picked each other over applause, and that a school, imperfect and learning, kept choosing those picks again and again until the choosing became habit, and habit became culture, and culture became the quiet miracle by which ordinary people recognize their extraordinary responsibility to one another. And if a future student should feel small in a loud room, if a future laugh should bend toward cruelty, if a future crowd should hesitate between watching and acting, may they remember the day the room fell silent, the day lunches piled up like an altar to belonging, the day forgiveness took a shy step and found its balance, the day two girls discovered that bravery loves company, and may they discover for themselves, as Zariah did, that our voices are not loud because we shout, but because we mean it. Not powerful because they echo, but because they lift. Not historic because they trend, but because they heal. And may they too stand and breathe and speak and listen until the ordinary world around them begins once more to change.